was a highwayman. Along the coach roads I did ride, with a sword and pistol by my side.
In 1977, American singer-songwriter Jimmy Webb wrote and recorded Highwayman, a song that told the story of 4 workers on their final day. One a sailor, one a construction worker on the Hoover Dam, a pilot, and finally, the highwayman. The song told the story of reincarnation and was influenced by a real-life hanged highwayman, Jonathan Wild. In 1979, Glenn Campbell would record his version of the song for his Highwayman album.
I was a highwayman, along the coach roads I did ride, with sword and pistol by my side.
The song would fade into obscurity until 1985, when 4 legends of country music would team up to take it to #1. The Highwayman Band was made up of Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Kris Kristofferson. In the past few years of country music, pop country was starting to lose some of its power after the fading of the urban cowboy craze. The Highwayman single would stay in the hot country charts for 20 weeks, showing that the legends of country music, who had all been performing since the 60s, was still a driving force, and a voice that the country fans wanted to hear.
It's great to be here, thank you. We've had a pretty good run, these next guys and me. These other 3 fellas, we've been across the country and around the world together, and there's still no one that I'd rather introduce than my musical comrades, Kris Kristofferson, Waylon Jennings, and a babyface kid from Texas named Willie Nelson. They call us the Highwaymen.
The song was first pitched to Waylon a few years before, when Jimmy Webb himself suggested that Waylon record it. Waylon, who only had heard Glenn Campbell's version of the song, turned it down, feeling it wasn't the right fit for him. In 1984, while the Highwaymen was working on their album, Glenn Campbell played the song for Johnny Cash, and it was once again turned down. Marty Stewart would then play the song for Johnny Cash and explained that it was perfect because it told the story of 4 people, just like the group. Still nothing. That was until Glenn Campbell played it one more time, this time playing it for all 4. This time, something just clicked. Not only did they know that this song was the right fit for them, but they also felt it was the right name for the band and the album.
I was a highwayman, along the coach roads I did ride.
To help sell the song, the group made a music video. It was shot in black and white, with each actor singing their own part, as we see the ill-fated ending to each character. Each singer is shown in the sky singing their part, with the video ending of the 4 legends becoming the face of Mount Rushmore. The song would win a Grammy for the Best Country Song of the Year, as well as the AMC for Single of the Year.
Barbara, give us the news, would you?
Okay, the winner is Single Record of the Year, Highwayman.
On behalf of CBS Records, I'd like to thank the Academy. I'd like to thank the many radio stations who programmed this incredible record. Great producer, Mr. Chips Moman, and 4 great artists, Mr. Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Kris Kristofferson, the Highwaymen. Thank you.
First, let's meet their challengers. Featuring lead singer Mark Miller, they're a group from Nashville called Sawyer Brown. Lights go down, and Junior hits his feet, everybody's up on their feet.
Country music still had its more pop adult side, but one thing it was lacking was bubblegum pop music. Bubblegum pop music is mostly known as music with a catchy upbeat style aimed for a more younger crowd. Many critics would give that title to CMA's Horizon Award winners Sawyer Brown. The band would often get criticized for putting style before substance. However, the members of Sawyer Brown never saw their act anything like that. Bubblegum pop or not, fans were loving it.
And the winner is
Sawyer Brown.
Sawyer Brown.
In 1984, their single Leona would make it to number 14. But their follow-up in 1985 would go all the way to the top.
Well, Mama told me when I was 3, Lord, still never get you nowhere. It ain't street car jumping and backbeat bum and get along like it in there.
Step That Step would be their only #1 song in the 80s, as it seemed the band was just too flashy for country music fans. As country music radio was starting to swing back to a more traditional sound, it seems there were no place for the band Sawyer Brown. But all that would change in the 90s when Sawyer Brown would become one of the most successful bands of that decade.
You was laughing at me, I was doing James Dean. You was the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. When you rolled your eyes and twirled my pink furred eyes.
I'm here to present the award for the Male Vocalist of the Year.
The CMAs for 1985 was mostly a repeat of the past winners. Reba McEntire would take home Female Vocalist of the Year, while George Strait took home the award for Male, and he would also take home Album of the Year for Does Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind?
Well, do I look nervous? I really appreciate this very much. I'll never forget this night as long as I live.
The judge would continue their winning streak with Single of the Year with Why Not Me, and would also pick up Vocal Group of the Year. The Entertainer of the Year for 1985 would go to Ricky Skaggs.
Y'all forgive me, but I'm going to have to read a little bit. I didn't want to come up here and get all excited and not thank a bunch of people, so I'm real sorry for reading this. I hope y'all forgive me, because I didn't plan this, believe me.
One artist would pick up his 27th #1 and a Grammy for Lost in the 50s tonight. Ronnie Milsap would have a career most artists could only dream up. He would have 42 #1 singles, a record that would not be broken until George Strait did it in the mid-2000s. Ronnie was born in North Carolina in 1943 and was soon abandoned by his mother and then raised by his grandparents in the Smoky Mountains until age 5, when he was sent to North Carolina State School for the Blind and Deaf. Quickly, Ronnie would fall in love with music that he would hear late at night on the radio, from gospel to country to rhythm and blues. He would study at the Classic Music School Moorhead and there learned to play several instruments and would master the piano. Ronnie would go on to pursue a career in music with local success in the 60s, but things would change in 1972 when he moved to Nashville. Before moving, he would meet Charlie Pride, who came to one of his shows at the Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. This would lead to a meeting and working with Charlie Pride's manager, and he would soon sign a deal with RCA Records in 1973. His first single, I Hate You, hit #10.
And I'm trying to hate you right out of my mind.
His first #1, Pure Love, would hit in 1974 and start a string of #1s, such as A Legend in My Time, Daydreams About Night Things, Stand By My Woman Man, It Was Almost Like a Song, Smoky Mountain Rain, just to name a few.
But tears filled my eyes when I found out she was gone. Smoky Mountain rain keeps on falling. I keep on calling her name.
Mel McDaniel would see a lot of hits in the 80s, but he would score his biggest with the #1 hit in 1985 with a song about a girl wearing blue jeans. Conway Twitty was first given the song, but he thought it would be a better fit for John Anderson, so he had the song sent over. John would turn it down and later say that he didn't know it came from Conway Twitty. And if he did, he would have took a more serious thought about covering the song. The song would then land in the hands of Mel McDaniel, who would record it and take it to #1 on his 1985 album, Let It Roll.
Cause you see, it just comes naturally. No, the girl can't help it. Well, up on Main Street, by the taxi stand, there's a crowd of people and a traffic jam.
It's rare for an actor to be taken seriously when they decide to jump into the music business, but one artist was showing country music he was more than just a hit on a small screen, but also could be a hit in the country music charts. John Schneider was well known to most people as Bo Duke on the very successful TV show Dukes of Hazzard, but John wanted to give his other love a try, music. Although his first single, a cover of Elvis Presley's Is Now or Never, would hit #4 in 1981, it seemed that things after that just wasn't going to work for John in the music business.
It's now or never.
A number 13 song would follow up, but nothing after that could crack the top 30. That was until 1984, when he had 2 number ones in a row. I've Been Around Enough to Know and Country Girls would show Nashville that he was more than an actor trying to go country.
But Lord, I swear there's nothing anywhere that's better than a country girl. Ain't nothing better nowhere, 'Cause country girls are sweeter than Tupelo honey.
In 1985, 3 more top 10 singles would hit radio, with You're the Last Thing I Needed Tonight going to number 1. A few more hit singles would follow, but John would take a break to focus more on acting than his country music career.
You're the first thing that I'll need tomorrow, and you're the last thing that I needed tonight.
It might seem looking back that country music was soaring big with fans and sales. However, the truth is, after the urban cowboy craze, things for country music was starting to die down. Sure, there were some artists having huge success, like George Strait, The Judds, Alabama, and a few more. But overall, record sales for the last few years has started to tank. While the urban cowboy craze had pulled in some younger fans, overall, the fans of country music were older, who normally didn't buy the records. Country records are getting plenty of record play, but they all sound alike and no one's buying them. Bobby Bare would tell the New York Times in 1985. Bill Carter, a Nashville manager for a lot of country music stars, said that the producers of country music are just making the same formula of records over and over again. They only cared about sales and making what radio stations would play. It seemed country music, or at least those running country music, was not willing to take risks or try anything new to bring life back to country music. The first lady of country music would say if things didn't change soon, they would all go out of business. Artists that were selling 500,000 albums in the 70s were now lucky if they could sell 400,000 records. The average record sale for a number 1 country album was 100,000. It wasn't just new artists having hard times. Legends like Conway Twitty couldn't break over 150,000 copies of his 1984 album. Crystal Gayle, who had a huge hit singles, could only sell 80,000 copies of the album that the singles came from. This would affect every artist on every label. Bobby Bare would go on to say that some people will miss country music, but those people aren't the ones buying it. The New York Times would declare country music is dead in their 1985 article. It seemed country music was fading out of fashion, but things were about to get shook up in 1986 when a floodgate of new artists would show Nashville that country music was alive and well. A troubled young man from North Carolina, a hillbilly from the streets of LA, a Kentucky bluegrasser, and a Texas singer-songwriter would kick up a renaissance in country music and bring with it record sales unseen before in Nashville, as the birth of neo-traditional country would take over country radio and change things almost overnight. In 1985, country music was dealing with a decline it had never seen before. The urban cowboy craze of the early 80s was long over, and the dust had settled. Album sales dropped, and artists that once sold millions was finding it hard to sell thousands. The New York Times declared country music was dead, but in 1986 they would be proven wrong, as it would become one of the most successful years in country music history and start a new, more country sound dubbed neo-traditional. Singers like George Strait, Reba McEntire, and Ricky Skaggs had already started the more traditional sound with much success, but a new group of artists would bust onto the country music scene and change things forever.
Operator, please connect me with 1982.
One of the most successful new artists to hit in 1986 was a young man from North Carolina that had already been trying to break into the country music scene since the late 70s. Randy Travis was born Randy Trawick in Marshville, North Carolina. His father was a local meat packer who would build houses to support his wife and 6 kids. Randy and his brother David had the music bug from early on, and his father could see it. Both kids were sent to learn how to play the guitar, and his father would go on to build a stage on the back of the house so the boys could play for friends and family. But the life of Randy Travis wasn't easy. As a teen, he would find himself in trouble with the law many times, from reckless driving to stealing watches from a local store to even breaking into a church to hold a party. He would drop out of school in the 9th grade and would take odd jobs as he went in and out of court. On his 17th birthday, he was arrested once again, this time for public intoxication. It was clear something had to change for Randy. In 1977, he entered a local talent show with a chance to win $100 in cash and a recording session. The nightclub, Country City, USA, was owned by the strong-headed, business-savvy woman, Liv Hatcher, who quickly saw the talent in Randy Travis. She had big plans for Randy, but Randy had big plans, and that was with a local court, as he was facing jail times for stealing a car. Liv would head with Randy to court and make a deal with the judge that she would watch over him. He was given probation and released under her care. Liv would then get Randy booked around town at local clubs, and then that would lead to clubs all over the state. Soon the two would move to Nashville. They would meet with a small independent label called Paula Records, who teamed Randy up with Joe Stampley to produce 2 singles in 1979. Those 2 singles, She's My Woman and I'll Take Any Willing Woman, failed to make any real impact on country radio. Liv and Randy would keep at it, sending demo tapes to anyone they could in Nashville.
I got a sweet little gal at home, and I want to thank her for letting this old country boy put a ring on her finger. She's my sunshine on a cloudy day, medicine to make the pain go away, woman.
Liv would find a job managing a local Nashville club called the Nashville Palace, and she would hire Randy to clean the dishes and work him up on stage to sing whenever she could.
Again, please welcome Randy Ray and Nashville. Suppose I called you up tonight and told you that I love you. And suppose I said I want to come back home.
However, some changes would be made, as now Randy Trawick would be billed as Randy Ray. A live Nashville Palace album would be made and sold at the club. They would hope this would get around Nashville. Across the street from the club was Opryland, where the nightly talk show Nashville Now will record live. Soon Randy would find himself on the show time to time, as he was personally invited by host Ralph Emery.
Would you welcome Randy Travis?
Thank you. You're spreading lies all over town about the way you brush me off and put me down.
Randy was getting a lot of exposure in Nashville, but nothing was really coming from it. Every record label in town had turned him down a number of times, often telling his manager that Randy was just too country. However, in 1984, that country sound was what Nashville was starting to look for. Mostly Warner Brothers Records, who was looking for more traditional country artists to sign up. Randy would make a deal with Warner Brothers if he agreed to one thing, changing his name once again. Now Randy Ray was Randy Travis. In early 1985, Randy would sign a deal with Warner Brothers. His first song would be Prairie Rose and would appear on the soundtrack to the Western comedy film Russell's Rhapsody.
There's a beauty in the sunset as it falls across the plain, where the desert blooms like magic from a few small drops of rain.
The first single, On the Other Hand, would be released in August of 1985 and would fail to make any real success on the country charts, reaching only number 67. Warner Brothers still believed they had something with Randy Travis and would release his second single, 1982, in early 1986. That second single would hit the top 10, and quickly country fans were waiting for the next song.
They say hindsight's 20/20, but I'm nearly going blind from staring at her photograph and wishing she was mine.
Warner Brothers then did an unusual move. They decided to re-release the song On the Other Hand. It was a big gamble, but it would pay off and give Randy Travis his first #1.
It was On the Other Hand released twice.
Yeah, it was released, well, it was about a year ago now, the first time, and it didn't do very well. I think it got up to like number 67. And then on 1982 did real well, and then the folks at Warner Brothers wanted to release On the Other Hand again, and I'm glad they did. So
you're in the top 10 with it?
Yeah, because it's doing real well.
How high did 1982 go?
It got to number 6 or 7. I can't remember which it was.
So that sort of opened the door.
Yeah, it definitely opened the door for me.
What seemed like almost overnight, Randy Travis went from dishwasher to one of country music's most beloved stars. His first album, Storms of Life, was released in June of 1986 and sold over 100,000 copies in the first week. The album's second single, Digging Up Bones, would also hit number 1, and the final single from the album, No Place Like Home, would hit number 2. But Randy wasn't the only new artist of 1986 making success in country music.
Well, I'm a honky-tonk man, ain't a crazy style. Love to give the girls the world to the music of an old jukebox.
Dwight Yoakam's music was as country as Randy Travis's, but a totally different style. Dwight was highly influenced by his Kentucky roots and the Bakersfield sound of Merle Haggard and Buck Owens. Unlike Randy Travis, who was trying to get Nashville to notice him, Dwight took a whole nother approach, one that was a little unusual for a country music artist trying to make it big. Dwight set his sights on Los Angeles. Out in California, a new type of country was becoming popular, alternative country, or what some would call cowpunk.
Which is country and punk. Now, why mix punk with perfectly good country and western? Ask lead singer Donna Lee.
See, what I feel about punk is that it made it possible to do many different kinds of music without sticking within the form strictly. So that's all we're doing.
Artists like Joel, Rank and File, and Lone Justice were becoming local hits performing their new style of music in LA nightclubs. Dwight was soon finding himself performing in those nightclubs as his name started to spread around the Los Angeles scene. Dwight would record a 6-song EP titled Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc. on Oak Records. Mostly he would use this record to get his sound heard outside the clubs. That plan paid off as it was heard by an executive at Warner Brothers Reprise Records. They liked his sound and quickly signed up Dwight and re-released his EP, adding 4 more songs to make a full album.
Girl, you taught me how to hurt real bad, cry myself to sleep. Show me how this town shattered dreams.
The first single, a cover of Johnny Horton's Honky Tonk Man, reached number 3. Dwight Yoakam was so hot he would become the first country artist to have his video appear on MTV. Whatever this new alternative country music was, people were loving it. The album would rocket to number 1. Again, like Randy Travis, Dwight was seen to many as an overnight success and would become a household name to country music fans in 1986. As Dwight Yoakam was becoming the talk of the LA nightclub scene, singer-songwriter Steve Earle would write on a Hollywood dressing room wall, "Dwight Yoakam eats sushi." The two artists were friends, but like Randy Travis, Steve Earle had a whole different sound of music. Steve brought back a more singer-songwriter style when he hit the top 10 in 1986 with Guitar Town. Steve had been singing and writing songs around Nashville since the mid-70s, where he would find a job as a staff writer. He would write the song When You Fall in Love for Johnny Lee, and it would become a number 1 hit in 1982.
There'll be a rainbow around the moon. You'll fall apart when you hear that tune. And every day will end too soon when you fall in love.
Steve would record an EP that would lead him to a record deal with Epic Records. 3 singles would be released but couldn't break into the top 70 single chart. This would cause Epic Records to release Steve from his contract, but he would soon sign a 7-record deal with MCA. The first single, Hillbilly Highway, was released in early 1986 and would only hit number 37. However, his second single would break into the top 10. That single was Guitar Town. The album of the same name would hit number 1 in 1986.
I'm just that off from about San Antonio with the radio blasting and the bird dog on. There's a speed trap up ahead of Selma Town, but no local yokel gonna shut me down.
3 new country artists were bringing 3 different types of country music to the fans, and it was paying off. For the first time in country music history, there was a new number 1 song each week of the year. Fans were back, and record sales were starting to move up. But the crowded country charts and record sales were making it hard for older artists to stay on top. This would cause Columbia Records to drop Johnny Cash after 28 years. It was clear a shift was happening, and a lot of the pop country artists of the early 80s was now finding it hard to stay on country radio. However, one singer to have huge success in 1986 was a 70s soft rock singer who decided to make it on his own. Dan Seals and his brother would have a string of hits in the 70s as Stills and Crawford, with songs like Summer Breeze and Diamond Girl.
Summer breeze makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind.
In In 1976, Dan, now England Dan, will record with John Ford Conley and hit #1 on the pop charts with I Really Love to See You Tonight.
I'm not talking about millennium, and I don't want to change your life, but there's a warm wind blowing the stars around, and I really love to see you tonight.
By the 1980s, Dan Seals was trying to start a country career. In 1985, he would team up with Marie Osmond for the #1 single, Meet Me in Montana, and in late 1985, he would release one of the biggest songs of 1986, a bop. This would hit #1 and would lead to 7 more #1s in a row for Dan Seals. Another artist that had been trying to make a success in country music finally was able to get not 1 but 2 top 10 songs in 1986. Keith Whitley had been singing country and bluegrass music ever since he was a kid, but by the 80s he was really trying to break in as a solo artist. His first album, a 6-track EP called Hard Act to Follow, was released in 1984 without much success. No single from the EP could even break into the top 50. In late 1985, Keith would release his first full album, LA to Miami, reaching number 26 on the charts. The second single, Miami Miami, would break into the top 20, reaching number 14. And his next 2 singles in 1986, 10 Feet Away and Homecoming 63, would both hit number 9.
By 57, off to heaven, backseat loving girl, you were something. Homecoming 63.
Over at the CMAs, country icon George Jones would take home Video of the Year with his song that asked the burning question, who's gonna fill their shoes?
Lord, I wonder who's gonna fill their shoes. Who's gonna fill their shoes? Who's gonna stand that tall? Who's gonna play the Opry and the Wabash Cannonball?
George Strait would once again take home Male Vocalist of the Year.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Dan Seals would take Single of the Year, as Paul Overstreet and Don Slits would take home Song of the Year for writing On the Other Hand for Randy Travis. Reba McEntire was truly dominating the female space of country music, as she would take home Female Artist of the Year and the big award of the night, Entertainer of the Year.
I'm not gonna cry, I'm gonna faint. The entertainment business means the world to me. You gotta have a song to sing. And before I go any further, Charlie reminded me I didn't thank the songwriters for letting me have the songs, so thank them very first.
Over on the small screen for country music, things were getting shook up on Hee Haw when co-host Buck Owens decided to leave the show after 17 years, leaving Roy Clark as the single host for the show for the next 6 years.
Jerry! Boy, you look like you need a haircut bad. Have you tried Archie's barbershop yet?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I had. I was over there this afternoon, but his hands was dirty. I just wouldn't let him cut my hair.
Dirty? How disgraceful, Archie. Who ever heard of a barber with dirty hair?
Sadly, some tragedy did hit country music in 1986. George Strait was high on his 7th album and 2 hit #1 singles with Nobody in His Right Mind Will Left Her and It Ain't Cool Being Crazy About You, when tragedy would hit the Strait family. His 13-year-old daughter, Jennifer Strait, was killed in a car accident in Texas. Jennifer was riding in a Ford Mustang being driven by 18-year-old George Allen. According to the police officer investigating the accident, it was determined that the wreck was due to excessive speed and the car had flipped making a sharp turn. No drugs or alcohol was involved in the crash. All 6 passengers in the car were not wearing their seatbelt at the time. Jennifer was ejected from the car and killed on impact. As 1986 came to a close, it was clear that country music wasn't dead, and fans got the answer to George Jones' question, who's gonna fill their shoes? 1987 would continue the success that 1986 started, and finally one of country music's most iconic singers would get the recognition from Nashville that he had long deserved.
This is the one. This is the one old Bo Seba's been looking for, I guarantee you.
Cheating heart will make you weep.
Hank Williams Jr. was born to be a singer, and as a kid, many thought he was born to be a clone of his famous father, Hank Williams. As a kid, Hank, he had no problem acting like his father for the fans, but as an adult, he found it hard to be someone he wasn't, and always standing in the shadows of his very famous father.
And of course, I was a little boy, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, and that's all I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to put on those boots, and I wanted a hat, and I wanted everything just like him, see. But in the late teens and early 20s, I didn't want to do that because I wasn't a little boy anymore. It was fun for a little boy, but it was hell for a man.
So he finally decided it was time to be himself, to do his own music his own way. It was either that or just stop performing altogether. In the early 70s, he would find some success scoring top 10 singles. His first number one would come in 1970 with All for the Love of Sunshine.
All for the love of sunshine. All for the love of sunshine.
However, Hank still felt he wasn't really doing his own thing, even if he was now doing his own songs. He decided to pack up and get away from Nashville. He would move to Alabama and try to not only get his music on track, but his personal life also, which at the time was being consumed with drinking, drugs, and issues with a number of women. There he started to hang out with the harder side of country music. He found he fit in with the southern rock crowd more than the Nashville sound. This would lead him to recording an album with his new friends, one with a more southern rock style called Hank Williams Jr. and Friends. However, Hank would almost lose his life just months before the release of the album. While on a hunting trip, Hank Jr. would take a 500 fall as he was climbing up Ajax Mountain in Montana.
Because I never thought I'd see again or live, number one, when I was still out of it. Then I didn't know if I'd see again, or if I could talk and, you know, all these operations and stuff. If I could walk out on a stage, look at a girl or an audience or anything anymore. And it makes you appreciate life, and it makes a lot of the trivial things go way down the list, you know.
Did you make any kind of deals with God when you were laying on that mountain?
Yeah, I said, I don't want to die. Lord, I can't see much. I can't feel much. I don't think I can hardly talk at all. The roof of my mouth, and most of my teeth is not there. And I told you many times I never wanted to sing again, and I think we've got a square deal.
The new album was released December of 1975 on MGM Records, but with Hank Jr. still in a hospital bed, the album got little promotion. It would peak at number 17, and the two singles, Stoned at the Jukebox and Living Proof, would have little impact on the singles chart. It seems his breakthrough album wasn't going to be the breakthrough he hoped it would. Even if the album was being praised by most critics, at the time calling it a new fresh sound for Hank Williams Jr. Hank Jr. would recover from his fall and release a new album in 1977 entitled One Night Stands, but it also would find little success, just as its follow-up, New South, would also struggle. It might seem like Hank Williams Jr.'s new style wasn't working, but on the road his concerts were drawing a huge crowd, and a rowdy one at that.
Hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How about cooking something up with me? You say, hey, sweet baby, don't you think, baby, we can find us a brand new recipe?
This would cause him to have a growing fan base, but Nashville wasn't really pushing his sound to the right people. In 1979, he would release the album Family Tradition. Its title track would finally break Hank Jr. out of the shadows and give him a fan base outside of the concert tours. Family Tradition would hit number 4 on the singles chart, and that album would go gold. He would follow that up with a new album called Whiskey Been and Hellbound, and that title song would reach number 2. Hank Jr. might have seemed like a new artist in the late 70s, but his Whiskey Been and Hellbound album was his 30th album released. Finally, Hank Williams Jr. was finding success on his own. His following albums would all reach the top of the charts, and his singles would all reach the top 5, with Texas Women being his first number 1 in the 80s. Even if he was racking up ticket sales, record sales, and releasing number 1 songs, he was still being overlooked by the Nashville higher-ups that ran country music. Most of them felt he was just too wild, too crazy to work with, and didn't fit into the country music mold that was popular at the time. By the end of 1982, 8 of his albums would be on the Billboard's Top 100 album charts at one time, something no other artist had done.
I don't have to explain it to you. You take the name Hank Williams Jr. and say he's going to have 8 albums on the Billboard charts. You tell them that in 1974, if I would say, what? No way, you must be crazy.
Hank Jr. kept pushing on with his wild concerts and albums that got better with each release. By 1987, there was no way for the Nashville big shots to ignore him. He would end 1987 taking home CMA's biggest award, Entertainer of the Year, and that honor would also be given to him by the ACM.
And the winner is Hank Williams Jr.
Yeah. This is the one. This is the one old Bo Seba's been looking for, I guarantee you. I got to looking so long, I thought I was going to run out of glasses there for a few years.
The new neo-traditional country sound that was taking over country music in 1986 didn't slow down in 1987, as now every record company wanted their next Randy Travis, Dwight Yoakam, or Reba McEntire. Randy Travis would follow up his huge 1986 success with even more success when his single, Forever and Ever Amen, would spend 3 weeks at number 1. The last song to hit number 1 on the country charts more than 1 week was Lost in the 50s Tonight by Ronnie Milsap in 1985. Between that time and 1987, 85 songs would hit number 1.
As sure as I live, this love that I give is gonna be yours until the day that I die.
In 1986, it was the boys of country music that broke out as the hottest new artist. But 1987, it would be time for the female artists to break out. Holly Dunn started her career by performing in a band called Freedom Folk Singers and would tour mostly in the South. After college, she found herself as a demo singer, as her and her brother wrote songs for CBS Records. The two would write the top 10 hit, I'm Not Through Loving You Yet by Louise Mandrell.
Stop acting like you've already left. I'm not through loving you yet. Don't you turn your back.
This would lead to Holly Dunn getting a record deal with MTM Records. The first 2 singles, Playing for Keeps and My Heart Holds On, failed to have any real success on the singles charts. Her breakout would come with a song that she wrote about her father called Daddy's Hands. It would hit number 7 in 1986.
I remember Daddy's hands folded silently in prayer and reaching out to hold me when I had a nightmare.
By 1987, top 10 singles would keep coming, with Love Someone Like Me, Only When I Love, and Strangers Again. She would even team up with Michael Martin Murphey for Facing the Crowd and hit number 4. Another female to break into the scene was 45-year-old KT Oslin. Her 1987 album, 80s Lady, would hit number 1, and its title song would go to number 7. The follow-up single, Do Ya, and I'll Always Come Back both hit number 1.
Do you whisper my name just to bring a little comfort?
KT had gotten her start in college when she formed a folk trio band with Dave Jones and Guy Clark. They all 3 would perform around Texas. KT would even try her hand at acting, as she would go on a national tour with the play Hello Dolly and be part of the Broadway show West Side Story. In 1986, she would borrow $7,000 from her aunt, lose 40 pounds, rent a Nashville nightclub, and invite record executives to see her one-time showcase. The next day, she waited by the phone, waiting for those offers to come in. She waited and waited. No calls. KT felt it was over, but her close friend got her a meeting with Harold Seed, a Nashville producer who had successfully worked with Alabama. This would lead to a meeting with RCA Records, who would sign her up for a record deal. Although the new neo-traditional sound was being seen as the new sound of country music, it was clear that the sound of country music in the 80s was all kinds of sounds. Pop country was still having success, acts like Hank Williams Jr. in Alabama was showing more of a rock side of country music, and one of the most different artists to come out of the new era was a Texas singer-songwriter named Lyle Lovett. Lyle would write songs and play them around the A&M campus as a solo act during his free time. His name didn't take long to get around the state, as fans of the folk scene was falling in love with his unique music. He was signed a deal as a songwriter in the mid-80s, but he released his first album in 1986.
How did you get your record contract?
Well, the folks at MCA heard it, and then the publishing company I started working with, Criterion Music, took it out to Curb Records out there in Los Angeles, and they played it for the folks at MCA. And
his 1987 album, Pontiac, would be called a masterpiece by many critics. Rolling Stone magazine in 2004 would place it in their list of the 500 best albums of all times. He never was a huge hit when it came to singles, but his albums would sell big to his growing fan base. Over at the CMAs, the new sound of country music was racking up the awards. Randy Travis's Forever and Never Amen would take home both single and song of the year. And Randy Travis would pick up Male Vocalist of the Year, and his second album, Always and Forever, would win Best Album. Reba McEntire would take home Female Vocalist of the Year, with the judge winning Vocal Group of the Year. By 1987, the country music field was crowded with new artists. That crowd at times would make it hard for older, established artists to get much airplay on country radio, as the limited airtime was being filled with new acts. However, some of the classic country singers were still finding success. Merle Haggard would release his top 10 album, Chill Factor, and its lead-off single, Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Star, would hit number 1.
Twinkle, twinkle, lucky star, you send me love from where you are.
George Jones's 1986 album, Wine Color Roses, would hit the top 5, with its second single, Wine Color Roses, hitting number 8 in 1987.
Some wine colored roses, the color of
Conway Twitty would have 3 top 10 singles in a row with Julia, I Want to Know You Before We Make Love, and That's My Job, all from his album Borderline.
That's my job. That's what I do.
Waylon Jennings would hit number 1 with Rose in Paradise and follow that up with 2 more top 10 singles, and his album would hit the top 20.
I was born through hell on sun. Keep my rose in paradise.
Kenny Rogers and Ronnie Milsap would team up for Make No Mistake, She's Mine and take it to the top of the charts.
She's mine. She's mine. No, Kenny, she's mine.
The new artist might have been the hottest thing in Nashville, but radio and the fans were still supporting the older ones that came before. Every record label in 1987 was looking for the next big star, their Randy Travis. It would take until 1988 to show Columbia Records that they already had the next big thing already in 1987, as his 2 singles would jumpstart another overnight success story in country music for 1988.
She's not your baby anymore. She's not your baby anymore. Don't you know that gal is mine? Well, I treat her right and love her so, and I'm gonna keep her, don't you know?
1988 started off with the new talent of Ricky Van Shelton climbing the charts. Ricky had already had a few hits in 1987. Someone Lied, Life Turned Her That Way have both hit number 1. In 1988, he would score 4 more number 1 singles. Don't We All Have the Right and I'll Leave This World Loving You both came from his debut album, Wild Dreams, while the single From a Jack to a King would be the lead-off single of his new 1988 album, Loving Proof.
From a jack to a king, with no regrets, I stacked the cards last night, and Lady Love played her hand just right to make you king of my heart.
His father was a local gospel music singer, and Ricky loved his father singing and would pick up singing gospel music also. As he got older, he was turned on to pop music and started to sing those songs also. It wasn't until his teens that he fell in love with country music. Him and his brother would start up a band and perform around town. In 1984, Ricky's girlfriend Betty would find a job in Nashville, and Ricky would go along with her in hopes to start his music career. He found some work in Nashville clubs and would record demo tapes to pass around. One of those demo tapes was heard by a newspaper columnist who arranged a meeting with Ricky and Columbia Records. This would lead to his first album, Wide-Eyed Dreams, in 1987. The first single was a title track that hit number 24 on the charts. The second single would have more success. Crime of Passion would hit number 7. After that came his first number 1 and a huge boost to his career. Somebody Lied would hit number 1 in December of 1987, and this would also help the album get to the number 1 spot.
Could it be somebody lied?
In just a short time in Nashville, Ricky Van Shelton became one of the most successful country singers of the year. In the summer of 1988, his second album, Loving Proof, would be released and rocket to number 1. Not only was Ricky seeing huge sales, he was also picking up major awards. Somebody Lied would be nominated for Song of the Year, and he would win the CMA's 1988 Horizon Award.
Well, they told me to make it quick, and I'll tell you what, I'm gonna be quick and get out here and look at this thing. I want to thank everybody at the Academy, all the fans, all the radio people, Mom and Daddy, and just anybody else that deserves it. CBS.
In 1988, CMAs would add a new category called Vocal Group of the Year, and that would be handed out to any musical act with 2 or more singers. The first ones nominated for this new award was Alabama, the Forster Sisters, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Restless Heart, and the winner of the award, Highway 101.
And our producer, Paul Worley, and great guys, and all the folks at Warner's, and everybody that made this possible. Thank you. Amazing. Thank you guys.
Highway 101 was a band founded in 1986 in Los Angeles. The band was led by Pauline Carson, who had already had a few songs on the country music charts, but none would break into the top 50. The band signed with Warner Brothers in 1988, and their first single, Some Find Love, would fail to make any real impact on the charts, and the band would demand Warner Brothers pull it from a release, feeling it was too country pop, a sound they didn't want to put out. At this time, the neo-traditional country music sound was in full swing, and the band knew it. Their second single would be a more traditional country tune called Whiskey If You Were a Woman, and it would reach number 2 on the country charts.
Oh, whiskey, if you were a woman, I'd fight you and I'd win, Lord knows a woman.
Their second single, Somewhere Tonight, would top that and hit number 1, with Cry, 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 their following single, also hitting number 1.
It's a little creek now, but when the rain comes down, it's gonna be a raging river. I just heard my baby say goodbye.
I've got a tiger by the tail, it's plain to see. I won't pay much when you get through with me.
One of the biggest comebacks in 1988 was a singer that hadn't had a top 20 hit since 1974. Buck Owens was no stranger to country music fans. The younger fans had grown up watching Buck Owens co-host Hee Haw until 1986. In the late 60s and early 70s, Buck Owens was at the top of his career with hit after hit, from songs like Act Naturally, Love's Gonna Live Here, and I've Got a Tiger by the Tail. Buck was one of the leading voices in the Bakersfield Sound, a subgenre of country that started to emerge in the late 50s, giving country music a more rock and roll honky-tonk sound. Other than Buck Owens, one of the biggest stars of this sound was Merle Haggard. However, just because the two of them had the same taste in music, and even the same taste of women, that didn't mean they liked each other. After all, Merle Haggard would end up raising Buck Owens' kids when he married Buck's ex-wife.
I mean, did you guys socialize? I know you did your publishing through him at one point.
I didn't like him.
Oh, really?
He was married to at the time I was married to a lady that was married to him before.
Sure.
And I had his children.
Oh, that's right.
And
that sounds a little tricky.
It was easy to get crossways, with that going on. But we managed to keep our professional lives separated, and I always admired his music.
Buck's music career would take a nosedive when his best friend and bandmate Don Rich was killed in a car wreck in 1974. To Buck, playing music without Don Rich just wasn't the same or as fun.
And when you're tired of fooling around with 2 or 3, come on home and fool around with me.
Buck Owens would release music after this, but none had any real impact, and he became mostly well known as the face of Hee Haw. In 1988, he would team up with one of the biggest new talents in country music, Dwight Yoakam.
You don't know me, but you don't like me. Say you care, that's how I feel. But how many of you that sit and judge me?
Bakersfield.
Dwight, a big fan of Buck Owens, was putting the Bakersfield sound back on country music radio. The two would team up for a cover of one of Buck Owens' songs called Streets of Bakersfield. This would lead to Buck Owens' first number one since 1971 and Dwight's first number one ever.
If you and your baby have they fallen out, call me up, sweet mama. We'll go stepping out and we go honky tonkin'. Hey, good looking, we'll go honky tonkin'. What you got cooking, we'll go honky tonkin' round your town.
Hank Williams Jr. was continuing his winning streak by winning the CMA Entertainer of the Year for the second year in a row. He would also pick up the CMA Award for Best Album of the Year, Born to Boogie. One of the most unique artists to come out of 1988 was Canadian singer-songwriter Katie Lane, who brought her cowpunk music to the mainstream. In 1988, she would team up with rock and roll legend Roy Orbison for a cover of his song, Crying. This song would win them both a Grammy for Best Country Collaboration, and the song would be heard in the 1987 John Cryer film, Hiding Out. In 1988, she would win the Canadian Country Music Association's Entertainer of the Year and take that award home again for the next 3 years in a row. Randy Travis would be dominating most of the album charts of 1988, with his 1987 album Always and Forever hitting number one 18 times, and his 1988 album Old 8x10 would continue that success by debuting at number one and staying there for 8 weeks. Reba McEntire would share a lot of the number one spots on the album charts with Randy Travis. Her 1988 album, Reba, would stay at the top of the charts for 8 weeks, with the two singles, I Know How He Feels and New Fool and Old Game, both hitting number one. Patti Lovers had been trying since she signed a record deal with the MCA to break into the charts, but only a little success would come until 1988. She would get her first top 10 with If My Heart Had Windows, and the following single, A Little Bit of Love, hit number 2. This would also help her land a CMA nomination for Horizon Award in 1988.
I can't concentrate, and I pride myself on keeping my cool. But I've got to admit that I'm a little bit in love with you. Down, what's that flower you have on? Could it be a faded rose from days gone by? And did I hear you say he was meeting you here today to take you to his mansion in the sky?
Tanya Tucker started out her career in country music at the age of 13 when she had her first hit with Delta Dawn. A handful of other hits would follow, but sadly by the late 70s it seemed her career was fading out. By 1978 most of her singles wouldn't even hit the top 100, and those that did couldn't even break into the top 40. But Tanya wasn't one to give up. She would keep releasing singles and albums throughout the 80s, and by 1986, with the change in country music swinging back to a more traditional sound, Tanya was able to score her first top 10 single since 1982 with a number 3 hit, One Love at a Time. This will start off a string of top 10 hits for Tanya. In 1988, she will land 2 back-to-back number ones with If It Don't Come Easy and Strong Enough to Bend, and her final 1988 single, Highway Robbery, would hit number 2. As 1988 came to a close, country music was seeing huge sales unlike anything it had seen before. New artists would bring in a new younger fan base who's turning up to buy the albums at an unprecedented rate. Sadly, 1989 would bring tragedy to the country music fans, as one of his most brightest stars would pass away at his home.
He's a real good guy. I know all of his friends and songwriters are going to miss him. I worked with him a couple of weeks ago, and we were making plans to do his Memorial Day show in his hometown. I tell you, I'm so sorry.
Here's a song that was just recently, about 2 months ago, my first #1 record, and I think you all
from the bottom of my heart for helping to make that happen. It's a song that was laid around Nashville for about 3 years, and nobody recorded it. And I finally stumbled up on it. I guess I was doing a lot of stumbling back in those days, but my co-producer, Garth Fundus, found this song for me. And when I heard it, I knew it was a hit song, but I didn't really expect it to be as big a hit song as it was, and we're real proud of this one. It's the title song of our brand new album. It's called Don't Close Your Eyes.
Keith Whitley has seemed like he's been playing music since the day he was born. He was born in Ashland, Kentucky, and fell in love with country music very early on. But that wouldn't be the only love he would find early in life. In high school, he and his friends would find time racing their cars down the mountain roads of Kentucky and spending the rest of the time drinking up bootleg bourbon. One night, Keith found himself in a car with one of his close friends as they took a 120-mile-an-hour turn around a curve. The wreck would break Keith Whitley's neck, and his friend would lose his life. That didn't slow down the wild side of Keith Whitley. Just a short time later, he would drive his car off a cliff into a river and escape with a broken collarbone. It was clear Keith Whitley loved living on the edge, and he was heading down a road of a short life, unless he could change things. By 1969, Keith was 16 years old and tried to get his life on a much better path as he started to focus on his music. With his brother Dwight, he would perform at a small contest where he would meet Ricky Skaggs. The two would bond over their love for bluegrass and country music. The two would play together wherever they could, and when bluegrass legend Ralph Stanley was late to a show due to a flat tire, the two friends took the stage to keep the crowd from leaving. When Ralph showed up, he was blown away by what he had heard on stage, saying it sounded like him in the early days. This led Ricky and Keith joining Stanley's band, and in 1974, Keith would be the lead singer. Around this time, he would also join up with bluegrass brand J.D. Crowe in the New South.
Well, you love me then as now. Well, you miss me when I'm gone.
He was really making a name for himself in the world of bluegrass music. Keith finally decided to head to Nashville to get country music a shot, as there was no real money at the time for bluegrass artists. In 1983, he arrived in Nashville and quickly signed a deal with RCA Records. This led to his first EP, A Hard Act to Follow, in 1984. The album failed to do anything, and his two singles failed to even make the top 50 country charts. However, RCA Records still believed in Keith, and by 1985 would release his full album, LA to Miami. This would give Keith his first top 20 hit, with Miami, Miami hitting number 15.
Calling me from Miami, Miami. What took you so long? I thought you'd never call.
3 more singles would follow, with them all doing well in the charts, but none of them would be a smash hit. During the promotion for the album, Keith would meet Lori Morgan, the daughter of country star George Morgan. The two would hit it off and quickly fall in love and get married in November of 1986 and would have a son the following year. In 1987, Keith was hard at work on his follow-up album, but he wasn't happy with how it was going. He asked RCA to shelf the 15 songs they had picked out for the album. He just felt they were not up to his standards, and he wanted more control over the production and songs. The album would be called Don't Close Your Eyes and would hit stores in 1988. This follow-up album would be a huge success. The first 3 singles would all hit number 1. 1988 was coming to a close for Keith, and he found himself on top of the world. A happy marriage, a new son. He adopted Lori Morgan's daughter from a previous marriage. His new album was sitting on the top of country charts, and the singles were all going to number 1. And he was already starting work on his next album. It seemed nothing could stop the success of Keith Whitley. Nothing but Keith himself.
Got a brand new single coming out in about a week, and a brand new album coming out about 4 weeks after that. Called Don't Close Your Eyes. That's the title of both the single and the album, and I'm real excited about this. This is the first time I've got the chance to produce myself. I co-produced this along with Garth Fundus, and all the feedback we've had on it so far, I think it's the best stuff that we've ever done.
Keith had seemed to put the wild side behind him in the last couple of years, but those close to the singer knew he still had a major struggle with drugs and alcohol. May night started like any other day for Keith. He was home alone. His wife was heading to Alaska for a show. Keith made plans with his brother-in-law to play golf. Before being picked up for that, Keith planned to write some songs for him and Lori to sing together. When his brother-in-law arrived at Keith's home to pick him up for golf, no one came to the door. Worried, he entered the home and found Keith unresponsive on his bed. He was rushed to the hospital by ambulance and there was pronounced dead at the age of 34 due to alcohol poisoning.
we've had a special relationship for about 3 years now. Man, I hate to lose him. He's a real good guy. I know all of his friends and songwriters are gonna miss him. I worked with him a couple of weeks ago, and we were making plans to do his Memorial Day show in his hometown. I tell you, I'm so sorry.
The death of Keith Whitley would shock his family, his friends, and his fans, and leave a dark cloud over the country music scene for most of 1989. In August of that year, Keith's follow-up album, I Wonder Do You Think of Me, would be released, and with it would come 2 #1 singles, the title track and It Ain't Nothing. The other singles from the album would all make the top 5. Keith Whitley was gone way too soon, but his impact in country music would still be felt today, as fans who were not even alive in 1989 would discover and fall in love with Keith Whitley.
When you love me tonight, don't close your eyes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Country music had to go on, and it did. In 1986, almost overnight, the face of country music changed with new artists like Randy Travis, Dwight Yoakam, and Steve Earle. 1989 would bring even more new faces to country music. One of the new faces really to break out would be Texas singer Clint Black, who was born near Red Bank, New Jersey, but his family would move to Texas before he was even 1.
What do you say when it's over? Don't know if I should say anything.
By the age of 13, Clint had taught himself to play harmonica. At 14, he was writing his own songs, and by 15, he had to learn to play the guitar. On the weekend, him and his family would host a backyard barbecue, and the neighbors would come over for some good food and listen to Clint and his brother sing. Clint would take up playing local places as he got older and then expand across Texas. For 6 years, he would do music as a side job while working construction, then bait cutting, and then he was a fisher guide. By 1987, he found himself in Nashville and a meeting with ZZ Top's producer, Bill Ham. This led to a RCA record deal in October of 1987. They released his first album, Killin' Time, in 1989. The first single, Better Man, hit #1. This would be the first time in 14 years that a country artist's first single would hit #1. 5 singles would be released from the album, and 4 of those 5 singles would hit #1. Keith Whitley's wife, Lori Morgan, had been trying to have a successful country career for years. Her first single would be released in 1979 and hit number 75. Year after year, Lori kept trying with very little success. But as she was dealing with the loss of her husband, her music career was finally taking off. In 1989, she would get her first #1 with 5 Minutes, and her other 2 singles of the year would hit the top 10.
You've got 5 minutes to tell me what I needed to hear. You've got 5 minutes to show me that you're really sincere. That's not much time to change my mind. It'll take a miracle, no doubt.
One of the biggest bands to really make an impact in 1989 was Shenandoah. Their first album in 1987 failed to even make the top 100 charts, but their second album would be released in 1989 and would put the group on the top of the charts. The Road Not Taken would release 3 singles in 1989 and all hit #1. Church on Cumberland Road, 2 Dozen Roses, and Sunday in the South.
We've been rocking all night, don't you know? You got to get me to the church on the Cumberland Road. Jimmy's passed out in a bag, but we know he's alive. Get around, fit that his head hanging over the side. Here you are doing only 95. What's the matter with you, man? I thought you said you could drive.
You ran and cried to the bedroom. I ran off to the bar. Other pills of heaven gone ahead.
But the year wasn't all about newcomers, as one of the most iconic voices in country music from the 70s was still hitting the top of the charts. Vern Gosdin had hits up and down in the charts from the 70s and into the 80s, and in 1989 he would have some of his biggest hits. Who You Gonna Blame It On This Time, I'm Still Crazy, and That Just About Does It all hit the top 10. And his 1988 single, Chiseled in Stone, would win him the CMA Song of the Year in 1989.
He said, son, I know what you're going through.
Another country singer from years ago was having a major hit, one that had passed away over 35 years before 1989. Hank Williams would team up with his son for an instant classic called Tear in My Beer. The song was written in the early 1950s by Hank Sr., but never released. But Hank had given his demo tape to Big Bill Lister to record. The song went almost unheard until Lister found the demo record in his attic and got in contact with Hank Williams Jr. Hank Jr. would merge the vocal of his father and him together for a powerful duet, and the single would be released in January of 1989. Along with it would be a groundbreaking video that would show Hank Jr. and Hank Sr. singing together, with even Hank Sr. singing a song that he never did perform live.
All these blues that I found have really got me down. You are on my lonely mind.
That music video would win the CMA Music Video of the Year, and the two singers would take home Vocal Event of the Year.
And the winner is George Strait.
In 1989, George Strait would finally take home the top prize at the CMA by winning Entertainer of the Year. George would have his 11th number one in a row in 1989 with Ace in the Hole. Although his daughter was tragically killed a few years before, George did take a small break from touring, but kept focused on his music.
Let me read that again just to make sure. That's right. Well, first of all, I want to thank the CMA members for voting for me tonight, and I'm so excited. I've wanted this for so long. We've got so many people to thank. Thank you. Whew. I've got a great band. I've been accused of not talking a lot and telling a lot of jokes, and maybe that's true, but I've got a great band, and we go out there and we try to do the best that we can when we're on the stage, and I truly believe that the audiences go away entertained, and I hope they do anyway. I want to thank MCA Records for signing me back a long time ago when they had a lot of big acts on their roster at the time, and instead of sliding me under the stack, they stuck me right on top with the rest of them. I want to thank Herb Woolsey, my manager. There's so many people. My band, Tom Foote, and my wife, Norma. I want to say hi to Bubba at home, George Jr. as he likes to be called now. Thank y'all very much.
Baby's been coming home wearing a smile.
Paul Ostrey had made a name for himself in country music as one of the to-go songwriters, thanks to huge hits like Forever and Ever Amen, When You Say Nothing at All, Digging Up Bones, and more. Paul had always looked to make his own career in country music as more than a writer but also as a singer. He would first team up with two other songwriters for the trio SKO. They would release their album in 1987, and its single, Baby's Got a New Baby, would hit number one.
Baby's acting strange lately. I think baby's got a new baby. I see through her disguise, something in her eyes that she's afraid to tell me, 'cause baby's coming home later.
However, Paul would leave the group shortly after the success to make his own music. In 1988, he would sign a deal with RCA Records and release his second solo album, Sowing Love, in 1989. The album would release 5 singles, and all of them would hit the top 10, such as Love Helps Those, Seeing My Father and Me, and All the Fun.
I talk the way he talks, I'm starting to see my father in me, and I'm happy to see my father in me.
Artist of a Decade is a rare honor. In the 60s, the Academy Board of Directors honored Marty Robbins, and in the 70s, it was Loretta Lynn.
As the 80s came to a close, the ACM would award its Artist of the Decade, an award given out at the end of the decade to the artists who had the most impact of that decade. The ACM would give that award to the group Alabama, who was by far the most successful band of the 80s.
The Artist of the Decade, Alabama!
This is our first standing ovation.
I think whether it's a ball team or a band, I think that the most important thing is the coaching, Mr. Dale Morris and Joe Galani, Harold Shedd.
A lot of the new artists that would become known as the sound of the 80s got their start in the closing months of 1989. Alan Jackson, Travis Tritt, Mary Chapin Carpenter, and a young man from Tulsa, Oklahoma that would explode onto the country music scene, unlike anything country music has seen before, helping country music in the 90s go mainstream, as he would bring over fans who swore they would never listen to country music. He would also change the landscape of country music and shape the sound of the 90s for the good and the bad.